Jake Morrison stepped onto the cold floor of the arena. The ground beneath his boots was made of some kind of crystal that glowed with a soft blue light. He could feel the vibrations through his feet as thousands of alien beings in the stands above him roared and screamed in languages he had never heard before. The arena was huge. Jake had seen football stadiums back on Earth, but this place made them look like small rooms. The walls stretched up so high that he could barely see the top. Everywhere he looked, there were aliens. Some had scales, some had fur, some looked like walking rocks, and others seemed to be made of pure energy that flickered and danced in the air. Jake was alone in the center of the arena floor. Around him, 100 alien warriors were getting ready to fight. He had never seen anything like them before. Some were twice his size with muscles that bulged under their armor. Others were small and quick, darting back and forth like angry wasps. A few floated in the air without touching the ground at all. The human soldier took a deep breath and checked his equipment one more time. His plasma rifle felt familiar in his hands. He had trained with weapons like this for years, but he had never used one in a fight where his life really depended on it. The rifle had enough power for 43 shots. After that, he would have to use his sidearm, which only held 12 bullets. His combat knife hung at his side, sharp and ready. Jake thought about how he had ended up in this place. 3 months ago, Earth had asked to join something called the Galactic Defense Council. It was like a club for planets that wanted to work together to keep the galaxy safe. But the aliens who were already in the club did not want humans to join. Commander Lisa Hayes had tried to talk to them. She was smart and good at making deals with people. But the aliens just laughed at her. They said humans were too weak and soft to be part of their group. They called humans pink meat and baby creatures who would only get in the way during real fights. That was when General Zexthor made his challenge. He was the leader of a species called the Vorthak. They looked like giant lizards with sharp teeth and claws that could cut through metal. General Zexthor said that if humans wanted to join the council, they had to prove they could fight. He offered them the Trial of Supremacy. The Trial of Supremacy was an old tradition. When someone wanted to prove they were strong enough to join the galactic community, they had to fight in the arena. Usually a warrior would face 5 or 10 opponents. Sometimes if they were very brave or very stupid, they might face 20. The record was held by a creature from a planet called Corton. That warrior had defeated 18 enemies before falling down and not getting back up. But General Zexthor did not offer Jake 5 enemies or 10 or even 20. He offered him 100. Every species in the Galactic Defense Council would send their best fighter. Jake would have to beat all of them, or humanity would be banned from ever asking to join again. Jake had volunteered right away. Commander Hayes had tried to stop him. She said it was suicide and that they should try to find another way. But Jake knew there was no other way. The aliens would never respect humans until they saw what humans could do in a fight. Now Jake stood in the arena, watching his enemies prepare for battle. The Vorthak warriors were sharpening their claws and testing their energy weapons. They moved like pack hunters, always staying close together and watching each other's backs. Jake counted 12 of them. The Corton fighters were the biggest aliens in the arena. They looked like walking tanks made of muscle and bone. Their skin was thick and gray, like elephant hide, and they carried weapons that were taller than Jake. Each weapon looked like it could smash through a brick wall without slowing down. There were 8 Corton warriors. Some aliens floated in the air near the ceiling of the arena. These were from a place called Nexus Prime. They did not have bodies like most creatures. Instead, they were made of pure mental energy that glowed, with different colors. Jake had heard that these beings could get inside your head and make you see things that were not there, or make you forget how to fight. There were 6 of them floating above like angry clouds. Other species filled the rest of the arena. There were insect-like creatures with 4 arms and poison stingers. There were robots that had been built by some long-dead civilization but still fought like they were alive. There were shapeshifters that kept changing from one form to another, never staying the same for more than a few seconds. Jake noticed that none of the aliens were paying attention to each other. Each group stayed separate from the others. The Vorthak did not talk to the Corton. The floating energy beings ignored the insect creatures. They were all here to fight the human, but they were not working together as a team. That was interesting. Jake filed that information away in his mind. It might be useful later. The crowd in the stands was getting louder. Jake could not understand their words, but he could tell they were excited. Many of them were betting on how long the fight would last. Most bets seemed to be on whether Jake would survive for 1 minute or 2 minutes. Nobody thought he would last longer than that. Voice boomed across the arena in perfect English. It came from speakers hidden in the walls and ceiling. Human warrior Jake Morrison, you have accepted the trial of supremacy. You will face 100 champions from across the galaxy. If you defeat them all, your species will be granted membership in the Galactic Defense Council. If you fall, humanity will be forever banned from our ranks. Do you understand these terms? Jake nodded and spoke in a clear, strong voice. I understand. Do you wish to withdraw your challenge? This is your last chance to leave the arena alive. Jake smiled. It was not a happy smile, but the kind of smile that soldiers got when they were about to do something dangerous and stupid and necessary. No. Let's get this started. The alien warriors around him began to make noise. Some roared, some hissed, some made sounds like metal scraping against metal. They were trying to scare him, Jake realized. They wanted him to be afraid before the fight even started. But Jake was not afraid. He was nervous, sure. His heart was beating fast and his hands were a little sweaty inside his gloves. But he was not afraid. He had trained for situations like this his whole life. Not exactly like this because no human had ever faced 100 alien warriors before, but close enough. Jake thought about his training. He remembered his instructors back on Earth telling him that the most important thing in any fight was not to be the strongest or the fastest. The most important thing was to be smart. Humans had survived on Earth not because they were the biggest predators, but because they were the smartest. They learned to use tools, to work together, to adapt to any situation. The aliens around him were stronger than he was. They were faster, had better weapons, and some of them had abilities that seemed like magic. But Jake had something they did not have. He had studied them. For months he had watched videos of alien combat techniques. He had learned how each species fought, what their strengths were, and most importantly, what their weaknesses were. 3. Countdown began. A giant clock appeared in the air above the arena showing numbers that got smaller and smaller. 10, 9, 8. Jake took one last look around the arena. 100 enemies. Impossible odds. No backup coming. No way out except through them. 7, 6, 5. Jake gripped his rifle tighter and bent his knees, ready to move in any direction. 4, 3, 2. The crowd went silent. Even the alien warriors stopped making noise. 1. The barriers around the arena disappeared with a loud crash that echoed off the walls. The fight began. The moment the barriers dropped, chaos exploded across the arena floor. 100 alien warriors rushed toward Jake from every direction. Their battle cries filled the air with sounds that made Jake's ears ring. The ground shook under the weight of the charging Corton giants. The air crackled with energy as the floating beings from Nexus Prime prepared their mental attacks. Jake had exactly 30 seconds before the circle of enemies would close completely around him. Most fighters would have stood their ground and tried to defend themselves. Others might have run toward the walls to put their back against something solid. Jake did neither of these things. Instead, he ran straight toward the largest group of enemies. The Vorthak warriors were leading the charge from the north side of the arena. 12 lizard-like creatures with razor-sharp claws and energy weapons were racing toward him in a perfect formation. They expected Jake to try to run away or to stand still and shoot at them from a distance. They did not expect him to sprint directly at them at full speed. The lead Vorthak warrior hesitated for just a moment. His reptilian brain could not understand why prey was running toward the predator. That moment of confusion cost him his life. Jake's plasma rifle fired 3 times in rapid succession. The bright blue energy bolts hit the first 3 Vorthak warriors square in the chest. Their armor was tough, but not tough enough to stop military-grade plasma at close range. All three aliens dropped to the crystal floor and did not get back up, but Jake was not done. As the remaining Vorthak warriors tried to figure out what had just happened, Jake dove into a tactical roll that carried him under the swing of a massive Corton War hammer. The weapon passed through the air where Jake's head had been just a second before. If he had been standing up, the hammer would have turned his skull into paste. Jake came up from his roll right next to the Corton giant. The alien was huge, nearly 3 times Jake's size with gray skin as thick as armor plating. But Jake had studied Corton anatomy during his preparation. He knew that even the toughest armor had weak spots. Jake's combat knife slid between 2 plates of natural armor at the base of the Corton's neck. The blade found the nerve cluster that controlled the alien's motor functions. The giant's eyes went wide with surprise, then rolled back as his nervous system shut down. All that muscle and bone crashed to the ground like a falling tree. The other Corton warriors roared in anger. Their battle brother had been defeated by a creature 1/3 his size. They raised their massive weapons and charged toward Jake, but the human was already moving. Jake had a plan. It was simple, but simple plans often worked best in complicated situations. The plan was to make sure the aliens could not work together. As long as they all attacked him as one big group, he would be overwhelmed in seconds. But if he could make them fight as separate small groups, he might have a chance. Jake grabbed the fallen Corton's warhammer. The weapon was almost too heavy for him to lift, but adrenaline gave him extra strength. He spun around and threw the hammer at a group of insect-like creatures that were skittering toward him on 6 legs each. The hammer crashed into them like a bowling ball hitting pins, scattering them across the arena floor. The floating energy beings from Nexus Prime tried to attack Jake's mind. He felt their mental pressure pushing against his thoughts, trying to make him confused and scared. But Jake had trained for this too. He pulled a small device from his belt and activated it. Smoke poured out of the device, filling the air around him with thick gray clouds. The mental attacks from the floating aliens required them to see their target clearly. The smoke broke their concentration and scattered their focus. While they tried to find him through the gray haze, Jake moved to his next target. A group of robot warriors was marching toward him in perfect formation. These machines had been built by some ancient civilization that no longer existed, but they still followed their original programming. They moved in straight lines and attacked in predictable patterns. Jake had watched videos of them fighting and he knew their weakness. The robots were strong and their armor was thick, but they were not smart. They followed simple commands and could not adapt quickly to new situations. Jake pulled 2 grenades from his belt and threw them not at the robots but at the arena wall behind them. The explosions brought down chunks of crystal and metal that crashed into the robots from behind. Their programming told them to face forward toward their enemy, so they did not defend themselves from the falling debris. 3 robots were crushed immediately. The others spun around to face this new threat, which put their backs to Jake. Jake's plasma rifle spoke again. 4 quick shots hit the robots in their rear power cores. Sparks flew and smoke poured from their mechanical bodies as they shut down one by one. But Jake's success was making the other aliens angry and desperate. They began to change their tactics. Instead of rushing at him individually, they started to work together in small groups. The remaining Vorthak warriors spread out to surround him. The shapeshifters began copying the forms of aliens that Jake had already defeated, trying to confuse him. Jake rolled behind the body of the fallen Corton giant and used it as cover while he assessed the situation. He had been fighting for less than 2 minutes, but he had already taken down more than 20 enemies. His rifle had 17 shots left. His sidearm was still full. His knife was clean and sharp. More importantly, Jake was starting to understand the psychology of his opponents. Each alien species fought the way their evolution had shaped them. The Vorthak hunted in packs and relied on coordination. The Corton used brute force and direct attacks. The robots followed programming. The insect creatures used speed and numbers. But humans fought differently. Humans had evolved as persistence hunters and tool users. They adapted their tactics to whatever situation they faced. They used intelligence instead of relying on instinct. Jake spotted his next opportunity. A group of crystalline beings from Sigma Draconis was moving toward him in a perfect geometric formation. These aliens were living crystals that thought in mathematical patterns. They were incredibly strong when they worked together, but they became brittle and weak when their formation was broken. Jake waited until they were almost close enough to touch him. Then he activated another smoke grenade and rolled away from the Cortan's body. The crystalline beings could not see through the smoke, and without visual contact, they could not maintain their mathematical precision. Jake emerged from the smoke cloud behind the crystal aliens and opened fire. His plasma bolts shattered 3 of them immediately. The others tried to reform their pattern, but without their full number, the mathematics did not work. They moved slowly and awkwardly, like a machine with broken gears. Jake's knife finished off 2 more crystal beings before the survivors retreated to regroup with other species. The crowd in the stands was getting louder. Jake could hear the surprise in their alien voices. They had expected this fight to be over in 60 seconds, with the human warrior crushed under the weight of superior numbers. Instead, Jake was moving through the arena like a force of nature, turning the aliens' own strengths against them. But Jake knew he was just getting started. He had fought smart so far, but the remaining aliens were learning from his tactics. They would be more careful now, more coordinated. The easy victories were over. Jake checked his ammunition count again. 26 plasma shots used, 17 remaining. No injuries yet, but his combat suit had taken some damage from energy blasts and claw strikes. His left shoulder ached where a Vorthak energy bolt had grazed him. 77 enemies remained. The odds were still impossible, but they were getting better every second. Jake smiled grimly and moved toward his next target. The real fight was just beginning. The remaining 77 alien warriors were no longer making the same mistakes. They had watched Jake fight for 3 minutes now, and they were learning. The surviving Vorthak had stopped charging in straight lines. The floating energy beings were staying higher in the air where Jake could not reach them easily. Even the simple robot warriors were moving in more complex patterns. Jake crouched behind a pile of broken crystal debris and wiped sweat from his forehead. His combat suit was keeping his body temperature stable, but the stress of fighting so many enemies at once was starting to show. His breathing was faster than normal, and his heart was pounding like a drum in his chest. But Jake's mind was still sharp and clear. This was what he had trained for his entire military career. Not this exact situation, because no human had ever faced anything like this before. But he had trained for impossible odds and desperate circumstances. Jake watched the aliens regroup and smiled to himself. They were being more careful now, which was exactly what he wanted. Careful enemies moved slowly. Slow enemies gave him time to think and plan. And Jake had noticed something important about his opponents that they had not figured out yet. They were still not working together as one big team. The different species were cooperating within their own groups, but they were not trusting the other aliens enough to make a real alliance. The Vorthak did not share information with the Cortan. The energy beings ignored the insect creatures. Each group was fighting its own separate battle against Jake. Jake decided to use this weakness against them. He pulled a small mirror from his equipment pack and used it to reflect light from his plasma rifle's energy cell. The bright beam of light flashed across the arena toward a group of shadow creatures that lived in darkness. The sudden bright light made them scream and scatter like roaches when someone turns on a kitchen light. While the shadow creatures were running around in panic, they crashed into a formation of mechanical spider-like aliens that were trying to surround Jake from the left side. The spiders thought the shadow creatures were attacking them, so they began fighting each other instead of focusing on Jake. Jake used the confusion to move to a better position. He sprinted across the arena floor, sliding under the belly of a giant worm-like creature that was trying to crush him with its massive body. As he slid underneath the worm, Jake fired his plasma rifle straight up into the creature's soft underside. The worm let out a sound like a freight train and collapsed, its body blocking the path of 6 other aliens who were chasing Jake. But Jake's ammunition was running low. He had used 31 plasma shots and only had 12 left in his rifle. After that, he would have to rely on his sidearm, his knife, and whatever weapons he could take from defeated enemies. Jake knew he needed to make every shot count from now on. A group of 3 Corton warriors was charging toward him with their massive warhammers raised high. These giants had learned from watching their brother fall earlier. They were not attacking one at a time anymore. All 3 were coming at Jake together, and they were staying close enough to help each other if Jake tried any tricks. Jake let them get close. Very close. When the first Corton brought his hammer down in a crushing blow that would have flattened a normal human, Jake was not there anymore. He had rolled to the side at the last possible second, and the hammer hit the crystal floor with such force that it cracked and sent sharp fragments flying in all directions. The crystal shards hit the other 2 Corton in their eyes and faces. While they were trying to clear their vision, Jake scrambled up onto the back of the first giant. The Corton tried to shake him off, spinning around like a bull trying to throw a rodeo rider. But Jake held on tight and drove his combat knife into the nerve cluster at the base of the alien's skull. As the first Corton fell, Jake jumped to the second giant and repeated the attack. The third Corton swung his hammer at Jake, but the human dropped flat against his victim's back and the hammer hit the second Corton instead of Jake. The friendly fire blow knocked the second giant unconscious, and Jake finished off the third Corton with a plasma bolt to the head. 3 more enemies down, but Jake's rifle was getting dangerously low on power. He needed to find another way to fight. Jake looked around the arena and saw his next opportunity. Near the center of the fighting area, there was a control panel that operated some of the arena's systems. Jake had noticed it earlier, but had not had a chance to investigate. Now he sprinted toward it while dodging energy blasts from the floating aliens above. The control panel was covered with alien writing that Jake could not read, but the symbols and buttons looked similar to technology he had seen before. Jake had always been good with machines and electronics. He pressed a sequence of buttons, hoping he was guessing correctly about their function. Suddenly, jets of steam began shooting out of vents in the arena floor. The steam was scalding hot and filled the air with thick white clouds. Jake had accidentally activated the arena's cleaning system, but the result was better than he could have hoped for. The steam clouds hid Jake from his enemies and made it impossible for them to coordinate their attacks. The floating energy beings could not see through the steam to target him with their mental powers. The heat-sensitive aliens were confused because they could not tell the difference between Jake's body heat and the hot steam. Jake used the cover to move around the arena like a ghost. He appeared out of the steam clouds just long enough to take down an enemy, then disappeared again before the other aliens could react. His plasma rifle claimed 3 more victims. His knife found 2 others. A stolen Vorthak energy spear took down 3 insect creatures that were trying to corner him near the arena wall. But the aliens were adapting again. They began using wide-area attacks that did not require them to see Jake clearly. Energy blasts and explosive weapons filled the arena with deadly force. Jake had to keep moving constantly to avoid being hit by the random fire. One blast came close enough to knock Jake off his feet and send him sliding across the crystal floor. His combat suit absorbed most of the impact, but Jake felt like he had been hit by a truck. His left shoulder, which had been grazed earlier, now sent sharp pains down his arm every time he moved. Jake forced himself to get back up. Pain was just information his instructors had taught him. It told you that you were hurt, but it did not have to stop you from fighting. Jake had fought through worse injuries during training exercises back on Earth. The steam was starting to clear now, and Jake could see that he had reduced the number of his enemies to less than 50. Nearly half of the original 100 warriors were down. But the survivors were the toughest and smartest of their groups. They had learned from watching their companions fall, and they were not going to make the same mistakes. Jake's plasma rifle finally ran out of power. The weapon that had served him so well for the first part of the battle was now just expensive junk. Jake dropped it and drew his sidearm. 12 bullets against 47 alien warriors. The odds were still impossible, but they were getting better. Jake took cover behind the fallen body of a crystal creature and checked his remaining equipment. 1 sidearm with 12 rounds, 1 combat knife, 2 grenades, a handful of small devices like smoke bombs and flashbangs, and whatever weapons he could pick up from the aliens he had already defeated. It was not much, but it would have to be enough. Jake had come too far to give up now. Humanity was counting on him, and he would not let them down. The real test was about to begin. The 47 surviving aliens had finally learned to work together. Jake watched from behind his crystal cover as the different species began to coordinate their attacks for the first time. The floating energy beings from Nexus Prime were sharing information with the Vorthak pack hunters. The remaining Corton giants were positioning themselves to block Jake's escape routes, while the smaller, faster aliens prepared to attack from multiple directions. Jake realized that his earlier strategy of keeping the aliens confused and separated was no longer working. These survivors were the elite warriors of their species, and they had figured out that their only chance of defeating this strange human was to fight as one unified force. The change in tactics put Jake in serious danger. His sidearm only had 12 bullets and there were nearly 50 enemies left. Even if every shot killed an alien, which was unlikely, he would still be outnumbered 4-1. Jake needed a new plan, and he needed it fast. The aliens began their coordinated assault. Energy blasts from multiple directions forced Jake to abandon his cover and run toward the center of the arena. As he sprinted across the crystal floor, Jake noticed something that gave him an idea. The arena had been damaged by all the fighting. Cracks ran through the crystal floor like a spiderweb. Some sections looked like they might collapse if hit with enough force. Jake pulled one of his 2 remaining grenades from his belt and threw it not at the aliens, but at the largest crack in the floor. The explosion sent crystal shards flying in every direction and opened up a hole that dropped down into the machinery beneath the arena. Jake could see pipes, cables, and mechanical systems that kept the fighting area running. Several aliens fell into the hole before they could stop their charge. Others had to change direction to avoid the new pit, which broke up their coordinated attack. Jake used the confusion to pick up a fallen Vorthak energy weapon and test its power settings. The weapon was heavier than Jake's plasma rifle, and the controls were designed for clawed hands instead of human fingers. But Jake had studied Vorthak technology during his preparation for the trial. He managed to figure out the basic functions and set the weapon to its maximum power level. Jake's first shot with the alien weapon took down 2 insect creatures that were trying to flank him from the right. The energy beam was so powerful that it went through the first alien and hit the second one behind it. Both creatures dropped to the ground with smoking holes in their bodies. But using the Vorthak weapon had revealed Jake's position to the floating energy beings above. They launched a mental attack that hit Jake like a hammer blow to his brain. Suddenly, Jake could not tell which direction was up or down. The arena seemed to spin around him like a carnival ride. He stumbled and almost fell into his own hole in the floor. Jake fought against the mental invasion with techniques he had learned during resistance training. He focused on one simple thought and repeated it over and over in his mind like a mantra. I am Jake Morrison, I am a human soldier, I will not give up. The mental attack weakened as Jake's willpower pushed back against it. While Jake was fighting off the psychic assault, 3 surviving Corton warriors saw their chance. These giants had watched their brothers fall to Jake's knife attacks, so they had changed their strategy. Instead of trying to grab Jake or hit him with their hammers, they simply charged at him like living battering rams. Their plan was to knock Jake down and crush him under their combined weight. Jake saw them coming, but he was still dizzy from the mental attack. He could not dodge fast enough to avoid all 3 aliens. The first Corton hit Jake in the chest and sent him flying backward. Jake hit the arena wall so hard that cracks appeared in the crystal behind him. Pain shot through Jake's ribs and back. His combat suit had absorbed most of the impact, but Jake felt like he had been hit by a truck. Blood trickled from a cut on his forehead where his head had bounced off the wall. The 3 Corton giants advanced toward Jake, moving slowly and carefully. They thought the human was finished. One of them raised his massive warhammer for a killing blow, but Jake was not finished. As the hammer came down toward his head, Jake rolled to the side and the weapon hit the arena wall instead of his body. The impact sent more cracks through the crystal structure. Jake grabbed a shard of broken crystal that was as long as a sword and as sharp as a razor. The improvised weapon sliced through the leg of the nearest Cortan. The giant roared in pain and stumbled backward, green blood pouring from the wound. Jake rolled under the falling alien and drove his crystal blade up into the creature's armpit, where the natural armor was thinnest. The second Corton tried to grab Jake with his massive hands, but Jake was already moving. He scrambled up the alien's arm like he was climbing a tree and stabbed his crystal weapon into the creature's neck. The giant's eyes went wide with surprise before he collapsed. The third Corton had learned from watching his brothers die. Instead of trying to grab Jake or hit him directly, the alien picked up chunks of broken crystal and began throwing them like grenades. Each piece was the size of a bowling ball and hit with enough force to shatter bone. Jake dodged the first few throws, but he was getting tired. His movements were slower than they had been at the start of the fight. His injured shoulder was making it hard to use his left arm. His head still hurt from hitting the wall. Jake needed to end this fight quickly before exhaustion made him too slow to defend himself. He picked up his second and final grenade and pulled the pin, but instead of throwing it at the Cortan, Jake threw it straight up into the air toward the floating energy beings. The explosion in midair disrupted the psychic aliens and sent them spinning away from the center of the arena. Without their mental attacks to coordinate the remaining ground forces, the different alien species began to revert to their individual fighting styles. Jake used this opportunity to sprint toward a pile of weapons that had been dropped by fallen aliens. He needed firepower, and he needed it now. His sidearm still had all 12 bullets, but that was not nearly enough for the 30-something enemies that remained. Jake found what he was looking for in the pile of alien equipment: a Nexarian energy amplifier that could boost the power of any weapon it was attached to. Jake quickly connected the device to his sidearm and felt the weapon hum with increased energy. His first shot with the boosted sidearm created an energy beam that cut through 3 aliens in a straight line. The second shot overloaded a robot's power core and caused an explosion that took down 2 more mechanical warriors. The third shot shattered a group of crystalline beings like glass, but the energy amplifier was overheating Jake's sidearm. He could see smoke coming from the weapon's barrel, and the metal was getting too hot to hold comfortably. Jake realized he could only fire a few more shots before the gun would either break or explode in his hand. Jake made every shot count. 6 more energy beams found their targets, eliminating 6 more aliens. Then the sidearm finally overheated and stopped working. Jake dropped the smoking weapon and drew his combat knife. 21 aliens remained, and Jake was down to hand-to-hand combat. The odds were still impossible, but Jake had come too far to stop now. He thought about Earth, about Commander Hayes, about all the humans who were counting on him to prove that humanity deserved a place among the stars. Jake wiped the blood from his eyes and smiled. The final phase of the battle was about to begin. 21 alien warriors surrounded Jake in the center of the arena. He stood alone with nothing but his combat knife and his determination. Blood dripped from cuts on his face and arms. His combat suit was torn in several places. His left shoulder throbbed with pain every time he moved. But Jake's eyes were still bright and alert. He was hurt, but he was not beaten. The remaining aliens moved carefully now. They had watched Jake defeat nearly 80 of their companions with weapons, tactics, and pure human stubbornness. These survivors knew they were facing something they had never encountered before. A creature that refused to give up no matter how bad the odds became. Jake looked around at his enemies and made quick mental notes about each one. 2 Vorthak warriors with energy claws. 1 massive Cortan with a warhammer. 4 insect creatures with poison stingers. 3 robots with damaged armor. 5 crystalline beings moving in a broken formation. 2 floating energy beings still, dizzy from his grenade blast. 3 shapeshifters that kept changing forms. 1 shadow creature hiding in the darkness near the wall, 21 against 1. But Jake had learned something important during this fight. Numbers did not always matter, as much as people thought they did. What mattered was who wanted to win more. What mattered was who was willing to do whatever it took to survive. The aliens attacked first. The 2 Vorthak came at Jake from opposite sides, their energy claws crackling with deadly power. Jake waited until the last possible second, then dropped flat to the ground. The 2 Vorthak could not stop their charge in time. They crashed into each other above Jake's head, their claws cutting deep wounds in each other's bodies. Both aliens fell to the crystal floor, unconscious. 19 enemies left. The massive Corton warrior saw his chance and brought his warhammer down toward Jake's prone body. But Jake rolled away from the blow and grabbed the handle of the hammer as it hit the ground. The Cortan was strong, but Jake used the alien's own momentum against him. He pulled on the hammer handle while the Cortan was off balance, sending the giant stumbling forward into the arena wall. Jake's knife found the nerve cluster at the base of the Cortan's neck before the alien could recover. Another giant fell. 18 enemies left. The 4 insect creatures attacked together, their 6 legs carrying them across the arena floor like angry spiders. Their poison stingers dripped with venom that could kill most creatures in seconds. But Jake had noticed something about these aliens during the fight. They always attacked in the same pattern, with the largest insect in front and the others following behind. Jake grabbed a chunk of broken crystal and threw it at the lead insect. The creature dodged the projectile easily, but that was what Jake had wanted. While the lead insect was moving to avoid the crystal, Jake sprinted straight at the group. He slid under the body of the lead insect and came up in the middle of the formation. The insect creatures could not use their stingers without hitting each other. Jake's knife moved like lightning, finding weak spots in their chitinous armor. 4 quick strikes, 4 dead insects, 14 enemies left. The 3 robots advanced on Jake in perfect formation. These mechanical warriors had learned from watching their companions fall, and they had adjusted their programming to account for Jake's fighting style. They moved unpredictably, changed direction randomly, and covered each other's weak spots. But Jake had an advantage that no robot could match. He could think creatively and adapt to new situations faster than any computer program. Jake picked up one of the fallen Vorthak energy claws and threw it not at the robots, but at the damaged arena wall behind them. The energy weapon exploded on impact, bringing down a section of crystal wall that crashed into the robots' backs. The mechanical warriors spun around to face this new threat, just as Jake had hoped they would. While their backs were turned, Jake attacked with his knife, finding the power cores that kept each robot running. 11 enemies left. The 5 crystalline beings tried to reform their mathematical formation, but they no longer had enough members to create their powerful geometric patterns. They moved slowly and awkwardly, like a machine with missing parts. Jake circled around them, staying just out of reach while he looked for the best way to attack. The crystal beings were tough, and their natural armor was nearly impenetrable. But Jake remembered something from his studies of their species. These aliens were living crystals that resonated at specific frequencies. If that frequency was disrupted, their bodies would shatter like glass. Jake found what he was looking for among the fallen alien weapons: a Nexarian sonic disruptor that created high-frequency sound waves. Jake activated the device and pointed it at the crystal beings. The sound was so high-pitched that Jake could barely hear it, but the effect on the crystalline aliens was immediate. Their bodies began to vibrate and crack. Within seconds, all 5 crystal beings shattered into thousands of tiny pieces that scattered across the arena floor like diamonds. 6 enemies left. The 2 floating energy beings had recovered from Jake's earlier grenade attack. They launched a coordinated mental assault that hit Jake like a sledgehammer to his brain. The arena began to spin around him again. His vision blurred, and he could not tell which way was up. But Jake had fought off their mental attacks before, and he knew how to do it again. He focused on one simple thought and held on to it like an anchor in a storm. I am human. Humans do not give up. I will win this fight. While Jake was defending his mind, the 3 shapeshifters saw their opportunity. They had been studying Jake throughout the entire battle, learning his movements and fighting style. Now they changed their forms to look exactly like Jake himself. 3 identical copies of the human warrior advanced on him with copies of his own combat knife. Jake was still dizzy from the mental attack, but he noticed something the shapeshifters had missed. They had copied his appearance perfectly, but they moved wrong. They held their knives like aliens trying to use human weapons, not like a human soldier who had trained with that blade for years. Jake pretended to be more confused than he really was. He stumbled and acted like he could not tell which figures were real and which were copies. The 3 shapeshifters moved closer, confident that they had fooled him. When they were close enough to touch, Jake struck. His real combat knife moved, in a pattern that no alien could duplicate, a technique that had been passed down through generations of human warriors. The 3 shapeshifters tried to copy his movements, but they were a split second too slow. Jake's blade found its mark 3 times and the false copies collapsed. 3 enemies left. Only the 2 floating energy beings and the shadow creature remained. The energy beings realized that their mental attacks alone were not enough to stop this human. They began to glow brighter and brighter, preparing to release all their stored energy in one massive blast that would destroy everything in the arena, including themselves. Jake knew he had only seconds before the explosion. He grabbed the sonic disruptor he had used on the crystal beings and modified its frequency settings. Instead of targeting crystalline structures, he tuned it to disrupt energy patterns. The sonic waves hit the floating aliens just as they were about to explode. Their energy forms became unstable and collapsed in on themselves. Instead of a massive explosion, they simply faded away like dying light bulbs. 1 enemy left. The shadow creature emerged from the darkness near the arena wall. This alien was perhaps the most dangerous of all Jake's opponents. It could move through darkness like water, become completely invisible, and attack without warning. In the dim lighting of the damaged arena, the shadow creature had every advantage. But Jake had one final trick to play. He pulled out a small emergency flare from his equipment pack and activated it. Brilliant white light filled the arena, banishing every shadow and dark corner. The shadow creature screamed as the intense illumination burned its dark essence like acid. With nowhere to hide, the shadow creature was just another alien warrior. Jake's knife ended the fight with one final strike. Jake stood alone in the center of the arena, surrounded by the bodies of 100 alien warriors. The crowd was completely silent. No one could believe what they had just witnessed. A single human had defeated the greatest fighters from across the galaxy, using nothing but determination, intelligence, and the refusal to accept defeat. Commander. Lisa Hayes rushed down to the arena floor with a medical team, but Jake waved them away. His injuries were painful but not serious. More importantly, he had a message to deliver while the galaxy was watching. This was not about human strength, Jake announced, his voice carrying to every corner of the vast arena. This was about human spirit. We do not claim to be better than you. We claim to be different. We adapt. We overcome. We never give up. General. Zexthor approached with obvious respect in his reptilian eyes. How did you know our weaknesses so precisely, human warrior? Jake smiled, still breathing hard from the fight. Because we studied. Humans survive by learning from everyone around us. We prepare for every possibility we can imagine. We do not just train for the fight we expect. We train for the fight we fear. Within days, Earth was accepted into the Galactic Defense Council. But more than that, humanity had earned something far more valuable than membership in an organization. They had earned respect.